Greetings, traveler, I'm SnapJelly, and if you're not aware of this, people who donate $20 or more on my Patreon get as a special reward that they get to choose a topic for a future video. And this topic comes from Jacob Carlsbach, who donates $50. Can you believe that? That's like half of my monthly YouTube advertiser income. It's incredible. He asked me if I could make a video about movie fights, stage choreography, and how realistic that can get. Now, fact is, I could probably ramble about that for hours, and well, that would make an incredibly boring video, so I decided to do this instead. I am gonna talk about some movie fights that I enjoy, which will largely be because of the choreography. And I'm gonna talk to you about just a little bit about why I enjoy them. Like, just very shortly, what makes these fights, in my opinion, memorable and not forgettable, because very often when I see fights, I look at them the first time and I go like, oh, that's amazing, and then I look at them the second time and I go like, nah, okay, it's kind of obvious. And then a lot of the times I just don't get excited to begin with. I'm just indifferent from the first place. But these fights, they all stuck with me for some reason, and I want to share them with you today and just explain to you very shortly why. Yes, now, if you are familiar with my content, then you might be surprised to hear that I am not going to judge these fights on realism or practicality, which is usually what I do on this channel. No, instead, I just picked a few fights, basically off the top of my head, that I remember fondly, which, spoiler, will most likely have something to do with the choreography, but it doesn't have to. So I'm just going to give you a little list of my top 10 favorite movie fights, and I'm going to explain to you why I like them so much. So with that being said, and without further ado, let's begin.
Number 10. Oberyn versus the Mountain.
Oh, SnapJelly, you're already fucking up. Game of Thrones is not a movie, you retard. Okay, semantics, alright? Don't worry about it. See, I wanted to put this fight in here, even though it's not a movie, because, I'm probably gonna get a lot of shit for saying this, but usually the fights in Game of Thrones leave quite a bit to be desired. You see, when you're talking about choreography in movies, there's two main ways that you can do it, and one is what most movies today do, is they cut a lot. Like every single punch or slash or kick or whatever is a new cut from a new angle, and you have a lot of shake cam, so you can't really see what's going on. That's kind of a dead giveaway that the actors don't actually know how to fight, because they need to use camera angles and blah 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 to actually make it look like something. Which you can't judge him for, honestly. I mean, you can't expect an actor to be an incredible fighter as well. But Game of Thrones doesn't do this. Which, in a way, makes it quite obvious that the actors have no real skill as swordsmen. Which is, in another way sad. And honestly, most viewers are not going to be bothered by that. But me, I'm like, I look at the fights, and usually the first time I'm not really particularly excited to begin with, and then the more I watch him, the more I go like, eh. But with this fight, it's not the case. They made excellent use of a stunt double to do the incredible feats that Oberyn does. And before you go, but Jelly, shut the fuck up, Oberyn trained very hard for this fight. I'm sure he does, but he also very openly admits that he had a stunt double. Which I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's great. I remember it fondly because of that. The choreography is on point. It's not realistic by any means. It's ridiculous spins and flips and kicks and all that. But it looks great. It looks way better than any other fight in Game of Thrones. So that's why it's on this list.
Number 9. Aragorn versus Lurtz.
Now, I might be a little biased here because Lord of the Rings will always have a special place in my heart. And the fight between Aragorn and Lurtz is not amazing in terms of choreography either. There's two things that I really like about it. One is that, for once, the good guy actually has a bit of an issue with an enemy, which to me it seemed a little bit strange, because if I remember correctly, Lurtz doesn't even exist in the book, but I don't know why Lurtz would be stronger than the other Uruk-hai, and all the Uruk-hai fall like flies except for him. He gives Aragorn a lot of trouble all of a sudden, which I like, but it's weird. Like, why is Lurtz stronger? If Lurtz is stronger, if there's a way to actively make Uruk-hai stronger, why aren't all Uruk-hai stronger? Questions like that. But besides that point, the second thing that I really like about it is that it stays true to its nature in a way that Lurtz as an Uruk-hai fights like Uruk-hai fight. It doesn't all of a sudden become amazing. Like, that's what you see a lot. Like, when you see, like, grunts, they just fall left and right, no problem. And then all of a sudden you get, like, the boss. And the boss is an amazing fighter and all that. And you have the explanation that the fan base likes to give. You know, the fan base explanation is that grunts, they don't really know how to fight properly, which is, I suppose that's an explanation, but it's a lazy explanation that I don't really like. But Lurtz, he fights like an Uruk-hai. He fights like all the other Uruk-hai did. He just gives Aragorn more trouble. He's very wavy, very large swings and attacks, which I think is great. I really like it, and it makes sense in that regard. So, that's why I enjoy this fight. It's great. It is what I would imagine a fight with an Uruk-hai to be like, an actual fight. Because in theory, you could, like, slay dozens and dozens of enemies without getting killed yourself. Because there are HEMA practitioners today that if they do, like, 50 bouts, they'll win 47 of them. Like, there are amazing people like that. But, you know, for most people, that's not going to be the case. So, I like this fight because in my mind it makes sense. That is what I would imagine a fight with an Uruk-hai to be like. So, there you go.
Number 8. The Matrix Reloaded, I think. Neo versus a bunch of people.
Was it Reloaded? I think it was Reloaded. Anyway, now you guys are going, but Jelly, the Matrix Reloaded, this sucked, dick, it was terrible. Okay, I'm just talking about the fight here, right? I'm not talking about the story behind the fight or if why the fight actually makes sense. Just talking about the choreography. I like this because The Matrix is not a movie that really uses weapons other than guns, you know. And they use kung fu, you know, they use their fists, which is quite different from fighting with weapons. And now in this fight, Neo at some point grabs a sword and they start using melee kind of weapons. And I like this, not because it's realistic, it's not, it's absolute horseshit, and it's ridiculous, it's Superman anime bullshit, but it stays consistent. Their sword fighting or their usage of weapons is fairly similar to their usage of fists, which is something that I really like, and that's difficult. You know, it's difficult to choreograph properly if you, like, if you do stage combat or combat on movies and you get a disarm, all of a sudden you have to switch to fist fights. And The Matrix has such a specific style of fighting that I think it's amazing that they were able to adapt it into usage of weapons. So that's why I like it. In many ways it's ridiculous, but still, it's consistent, it's the same speed as it was before, which is something that I appreciate. They somehow made it, that they somehow managed to make it, so that even with jumps and kicks and flips and all of that, that still somehow the sword is in a logical place, which, all kinds of things that are good in my opinion. So, that's why it's on this list.
Number 7. Fred and Daphne versus the Black Knight Ghost in ScoobyDoo 2.
What? I didn't say the fights had to be good, okay? I just said I remembered them fondly. I really liked these movies as a kid, okay? Don't judge me. Moving on.
Number 6. Captain Algren versus this dude in The Last Samurai.
Okay, so this is not really a fight, it's a sparring match. But I like it nonetheless. I like it because the choreography of the fight is quite simplistic, right? But they make it look epic just because of how it is filmed and with the background music, and it's in slow motion that people think it's awesome. And at this point, this is the first time that Algren actually beats, or like, no, it's a tie actually, but in any case, doesn't lose against this man. I forgot his name, but like this samurai general guy, right? So it's a revelation. He's like, oh, he's becoming good with the swords and all of that, and people look at it and they go, like, oh, it's amazing. He's finally starting to get it. But if you look at the actual choreography, it's quite simple. They do the same moves over and over again. I gleeked all over my microphone. Just look, and I don't even have to slow it down because it's already in slow motion. If you look at it closely, there's a spin in there which makes no sense. Okay, there's maybe there's two actually, if I remember correctly. But they do the same movements over and over again. It's just a number one block and a number one strike and then a spin and another number one block. So it's very simplistic, but it looks epic anyway. So this proves that it doesn't have to be complicated for something to look awesome. Which is why I like this fight. Also, it's not really a sword fight because they use woken, which are technically like sticks rather than swords, but... Moving on.
Number 5. Sherlock Holmes versus this guy in Sherlock Holmes.
Okay, so I cheated a little bit again because this is not a sword fight. But it is Hema because Sherlock Holmes does Bartitsu, which is a style of fighting that the gentleman did in the 19th century. So it does count as Hema, so I figured, I like this fight. It's just number 5. I would have put it a lot higher, but because it's not a sword fight, I put it on 5. But I really like this fight. In any case, why do I really like this fight? Well, because they make use of something very clever. Expectation. Yes, if you've seen the movies, then you probably know that Sherlock Holmes has incredible deduction skills. So incredible that he very rarely gets something wrong, and if he does get something wrong, they make a great point out of it in the movies. His deduction skills are so incredible that he can just guess correctly what his enemy is going to do and make a plan and just beat the living shit out of him that way. And that's exactly what they do. In this fight, you see Sherlock, correctly I might add, guessing what his enemy is going to do and making a plan because of that. You can see clearly in slow motion everything that Sherlock is going to do to him, and he even says at the end how much damage he has inflicted on his opponent. Which is great. And after that, you see the fight in real time, which is a lot quicker and a lot less visible. Now, if you would put them side by side and slow down the sped up version, you can see that in various occasions, what Sherlock or Robert Downey Jr. is doing in the real time version is not what he said he was going to be doing in the slow-mo version. Now, and here comes the fanbase explanation. But Jelly, that is because Sherlock Holmes is not perfect, but he adapts very quickly. So, no. Okay, they make it a great point that Sherlock Holmes is never wrong. Alright? And the scenarios that you can see, that he does something, that he doesn't do the thing that he said he was going to do, he could have easily done what he said he was going to do, but he didn't. The reason that it is different is because Robert Downey Jr. doesn't actually know how to fight, because he's an actor, which you can blame him for, but it doesn't matter, because it's so quick and speedy and push that the audience just go like, whoa, look at that, he does it fast, he's such an amazing fighter, and no one actually thinks about it or minds it, except for that one twat on YouTube with his stupid long hair and his channel who thinks he knows shit about swords, like he might whine about it in his stupid top 10 video, but other than that, no one cares. Just look at this very basic example. This is what he says in the slow-mo version that he's gonna do.
Block ferrule left. Weaken right jaw. Now fracture.
Right, so first he elbows the jaw, and then he punches the jaw, both with his left hand. Now if you slow down the sped up version, this is what actually happens. Right, some half-assed karate chop that didn't even actually hit his opponent. If you look at it closely. But it doesn't matter, because it's so fast and people go, oh, look at that. No one minds that it's not the same thing. So there's a lot of that, which I think is weirdly good. It's great. Like the slow-mo version, it looks amazing. It looks very well done. I don't know if it's CG or however they made it, but it looks great. It looks convincing. Let's say that. It looks very convincing. And then after that, he doesn't do precisely the same thing, but you can just accept that he's an amazing fighter, and that's the end. That's great. It's I really like this style. I was really surprised when I first saw this movie, and I really enjoyed it, and I still do, in fact. Apparently, there's going to be a new Sherlock Holmes movie, and I'm very excited.
Number 4, Kingdom of Heaven. Will Turner versus the two knights that attack him.
I forgot his name in Kingdom of Heaven, but doesn't matter. Now again, in terms of realism, this fight leaves much to be desired. But there are some very basic things that I like. For example, he doesn't go for weird, arbitrary, super fancy kickflip, disarm, and stab his opponent with his sword that he disarmed. No, instead, he grabs a rock and beats the shit out of his opponent. It's very simple, but it makes sense, and that's why I like it. There are various instances in this fight where I go like, yeah, well, his enemies conveniently did not use their sword in this case because, well, that would of course kill him, and they don't actually want him to die. But, you know, overall, it's very hard to choreograph something like that, like an unarmored person with no weapon against people with armor and with weapons. That is incredibly difficult. If you look at actual fights, if you have no weapon and your opponent has, there are ways that you can win, but it's difficult, right? Let's just say that for now, it's just incredibly difficult. So there are some things that if it was a choreography that I would do, that I would have done differently, but my choreographies are not perfect either. So overall, I'm okay with it. In this fight, I like it because it looks like a brawl. It actually looks like Will Turner is fighting for his life in this case. He grabs a rock, he grabs like half a pot, I think, whatever. He does whatever he needs. And something else, no slicing through armor. Like he kills one guy, which I love, by stomping him and breaking his neck, which is insanely clever. I never thought of that, but it's so simple. And the other guy, he stabs him through the eye hole, not through the helmet or through the chest plate. I love it. It's absolutely great. So, yeah.
Number 3, Jack vs. Will, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Alright, so the choreography in Pirates of the Caribbean is a bit unique. Let's say that. It's not particularly, in a weird way, it's not dangerous. And we, in our HEMA group, we kind of make a joke, like for the, if we do background fighting, we call it Pirates of the Caribbeaning. It sounds better in Dutch, but whatever. So that's like, we do the same basic moves over and over again, like the same block, attack, block, attack, block, attack. Just because it looks nice in the background and you make some cling-clang noise. It doesn't actually have to be impressive. And if you look at the background choreography in Pirates of the Caribbean, it is very often quite ridiculous. But if you look at the duel, so to speak, in Pirates of the Caribbean, especially the earlier movies, I like them a lot because they, in a way, they make sense. They all revolve around something besides the actual fighting. It is never just, oh, two characters, oh, and we are fighting now. The characters always want to achieve something besides just killing the other, and that always results in conflict, which is something that I really like. Except for this one. This one is the most just fight-like fight that there is in Pirates of the Caribbean. And it is still great because they make amazing use of their surroundings. It's just a bunch of hilarity, really. It's not dangerous in a way, and it's incredible to me that they managed to make a sword fight with supposedly deadly intent for Will at least, and they make it hilarious and incredible, and they time it right, and just a bunch of good stuff. No matter how many times I see this fight, I still think it's amazing. I just do. It's good. It's great, and it is honestly in many ways an inspiration for me. Every time that I make a choreography myself, I start thinking about this fight, and I start thinking about how I could use the surroundings and different things that happen creatively in order to make it more exciting and different, rather than just an average cling clang sword, ooh, I stabbed you. So yeah, this fight, I like it. It's not intense in a way like most fights are, but it's still amazing.
Number 2, Zuko vs. Jet, Avater The Last Airbender.
Jelly, you fucked up again. This is not a movie. It's an anime, cartoon, whatever. Okay, I know, this is not a movie. It's not even real people, right? But it's my video. I make the rules, okay? Shut up. Now I like this. I like the sword fighting in Avatar The Last Airbender because there are superpowers, basically. Bending is superhuman magic, whatever you would call it. And you want to put something very normal and human in there, like sword fighting, and have that work properly. That is incredibly difficult, and that is where a lot of movies, in my opinion, go wrong. They make fantasy with magic and whatever, and they never actually change the swordsmanship. The swordsmanship is, no matter if it's good or bad swordsmanship, it's just normal swordsmanship, which doesn't really make sense. If magic exists, then people would adapt to that. And I think Avatar The Last Airbender did a very great job at implementing normal swordsmanship with something like bending, and still it's quite obvious that benders are more powerful than non-benders. Still, there's quite a lot you can do with just swords if you're a non-bender. Which, of course, in terms of realism makes no sense, but it's consistent, and I like that actually. So, in this fight, even if it's just swords, no bending involved, like in this fight, it is still consistent like it was before, like the sword fighting is if sword fighters fight benders, and so on and so forth. So that's why I put it in here. Alright, I don't know how this would adapt on like in like a real life version. The real life The Lost Airbender movie was not that great, but the cartoon or anime or whatever it is, they did it very well. And even if it is a cartoon, I still think it deserves praise. So there you go.
Number 1. Achilles versus Hector in Troy.
Alright, now I know that a lot of you guys are going to be disappointed that this is the number 1, because there's a lot more classic movies that people enjoy a lot more because of nostalgia. But I like this one, not because the movie is very great, but because the choreography is great. Well, unsurprising, right? This entire video has been about choreography, basically. Now, I've made a separate fight review on this fight, in which I already briefly said that I liked it a lot. And the reason I liked it a lot is not because it's realistic, but because it has basically all the components that I've talked about before in this video. It is consistent with its ridiculousness, like Achilles does a lot of jumps and weird flips that open him up and like puts his shield behind his back, which is stupid, but he consistently does that, and the timing is on point like throughout the entire fight. And you see a very, very clear difference in skill between Achilles and Hector, which is, again, incredibly difficult to choreograph if you want to have a fight that lasts long and have one of the people be actively and visibly worse fighter than the other. Then how do you make it last? You know, you get some points at the fight where one of the guys just dominating the other, and then how do you make the fight last? Things like that are incredibly difficult, which are, you know, slight things that make this fight great. And the fact that Achilles has never had his armor scratched, and Hector manages to scratch it a little. It's not a hit, it's still just a very slight scratch, but still, you know, it shows these things that Hector was an incredible fighter, but nothing compared to Achilles. All these little hints, they tell a story in a fight, which is why I like this fight, even though the movie may not have been that good. Alright, so that was it, guys. Jacob, I hope you enjoyed. Now, if you want to pick a topic for yourself, then you can. Link to my Patreon is in the description below, and thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one. Bye, guys.